Welcome and hello. This is Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we have a guest joining us from, of all places, Amsterdam. In just a moment, Grant Trahant will be with us. He is the founder of Causeartist. I'd also like to remind you that you can email us at heartstockradio@gmail.com. You can find us online, of course, in social media. We usually like to post our up-and-coming guests there. You can see what we're up to. This is Heartstock. In just a moment, Grant will be with us and tell us all about what he is up to. Hello again. I'm Carol Murphy, your host. This is Heartstock Radio. And Daniel Hogan is in the studio. Thanks for being there, Daniel. We appreciate you greatly. And today our guest is Grant Trahant of Causeartist. He is doing many, many things, Causeartist just being one of them. Hi, Grant.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, just great. A little chillier this morning. We were talking about the weather earlier, and we have finally gotten some normal Montana weather, which is a bit of a relief. It was very freakishly warm. And you're speaking with us from Amsterdam, is that right?
Yeah, well, it's very freakishly not sunny. It's a very dark and damp city in the wintertime. So I'm experiencing that for the first time, but it's good spirits. It's good spirits, though.
So you have a whole heck of a lot of going on in your life. Can you kind of give our listeners a little intro as to what you were up to there?
Sure. So at the moment, run Causeartist.com. So I've been doing that for the last 8 years now. It turned 8 in November of this year. So it's really been quite of a journey. And through that, I produce, tons of content around how do we use business in a different way for good, right? To use business as a force to make better things in the world, how we make things in the world, distribute, economic freedom a little more, a bunch of different ways on how, we can use business and shopping, really using our consumer dollars to shop better is really sort of what it was foundationally, what it was for. Through that, we've done thousands of pieces of content. I have 2 podcasts now. One features other entrepreneurs in the space, how they build their businesses, right? What's the mission behind it? What problem are they trying to solve through the products that they're creating? And then the other one is talking with investors in the space and how they look at investing in good, right? Investing in impact is much different. Getting that perspective of not just investing in things to make money necessarily, but how to invest in nature properly, like how to invest in products that create change and create impact in the world that, perhaps hasn't been looked at that before from an investor lens. So I kind of tackle both sides of the spectrum and kind of bring those together on Causeartist and kind of just cover the world of trending topics around sustainable fashion and impact investing and, anything that has to do with business as a force of good and how the world is changing through a business lens and through commerce and how we all can affect the world through how we shop and spend our dollars is a really, really big deal. So we just try to navigate that and all the ins and outs of that in this, global economy that affects us all.
Was there an event in your life that kind of was pivotal that influenced you to go down this path in life? What happened and how did you get so passionate and interested in this topic?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we all of a sudden we wake up and you kind of get slapped in the face of like, dang, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? I'm fortunate enough to sort of found that. And, I had a really just crazy odd journey and bounced around a lot and had to learn a lot on my own about a lot of different things. But, a big thing that happened in my life was Hurricane Katrina. And I was living in Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and I had gone back for my 21st birthday. After I came back, I was living in Kansas City for about 10 months, almost a year. And then I came back for my 21st birthday back to New Orleans. And, I had a great time and really missing everybody there. And, kind of made the decision that I was going to come back. Well, 2 weeks later, Hurricane Katrina hit, and, life changed for everybody, right? It's weird when you have everybody you've ever known lost everything they've ever had. It's a really weird feeling, but everybody went through it together. So it was a collective trauma. But through that,
So you're
from New Orleans, Louisiana. Yep.
That's
Yep.
your birthplace. How old were you when you left New Orleans?
I was 18 when I left.
Okay.
And bounced around a little bit, and then found my way to Kansas City, Missouri, via a friend that lived there. Anytime something like that happens, you sort of perhaps look at maybe why it happened, right? And kind of what are the things that occurred that maybe could have been avoided. And I think when I went down that road and looking at things, it was really just a lack of a lot of things. Really, allocating taxpayer dollars efficiently, right? To build, efficient levees and correct levees. And ironically, I moved, New Orleans, and now I live in Amsterdam, which is another city below sea level. So
yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah. And ironically here is, their levee system, their waterways. I mean, it's really, really unbelievable. And they actually hired the Dutch to come and help build the levees now that are in New Orleans and build the waterways now that you see now after Hurricane Katrina. So that was a bit of an ironic twist, but anyway, and kind of looking at that, I was really just, devastated when you go back and, your entire place where you grew up is just gone, right? It's done. Yeah. It's no longer, it's never going to be the same. And me and my friend had lived on, the property where we used to live in a FEMA trailer. And we kind of just walked out every morning, and it was, it was really a ghost town. It was so strange to see it so quiet and calm. And it was just really weird. And it's kind of like waking up in The Walking Dead. Like, I don't know if you ever saw that first episode where the guy walks out, he's just like, what? It was that strange. And so now your mind thinks is like, how did we get here? Right. And look, there's a lot of questions around, climate change and a lot of poor neighborhoods were decimated versus, right. Rich people or wealthy people can leave and evacuate where the poor have to stay. And so there's a lot of economic things that are involved in that. But at the end of the day, it's really that the citizens were paying taxes for, decades, right, to have United States levee system, right? I mean, the greatest country in the world, right? As we're sort of told in a lot of areas, that really failed us, know, and it really affected so many lives, and still does to this day. But I guess my point is that it was something that didn't have to happen. And so as I was looking at that, I was like, okay, if we have such a great failure of a local sort of government and a correct allocation of capital to protect its citizens, right? It's like, can business do something better, right? And I was looking at that from just Hurricane Katrina lens, but then I also looked at, okay, education. New Orleans is the first city in America to have a completely public charter school system now, because they could start from scratch after Katrina, which some will say is not, charter schools versus, traditional public schools. Everybody's going to have a side on the fence that they play on, but at least it's an opportunity to start over, right? And so we look at all these things when you have an opportunity to start over as a city or a town or whatever it may be. I was like, how do we use business or different ways of looking at whether it's homelessness, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare? How can we use business to scale that? Because governments don't scale efficiently, right? They're usually technologically inept in a lot of different areas, so they can't move fast and efficiently very well. But business, there's an incentive to move well and do things right. And so as I was looking at that, these type of things, like, how can we solve societal problems through business and through great ideas and innovation? So that was kind of the wheels that got spinning. And then as I went down the rabbit hole of all this stuff, I started seeing, companies using, fashion very efficiently and better to have everybody kind of knows the 1-for-1 model behind Tom's. But through that, there's been so many different companies and brands that have created products that, help their local community. Whether it's 1-for-1 underwear that help provide underwear to, women's battered shelters, right? We don't think of that, but people don't donate underwear. And it's a very hygienic thing that women need, right? And men too, but mostly women. And they, that's just not an item that's donated. So, there's brands that come up that help with that issue, right? So through a creation of a business, we can serve a purpose and an impact for women in that sense. And then, that brand has gone on to sort of, create jobs for those same women, right? Who don't perhaps have the skills and sort of been benign by society. They're living in a women's battered shelter. Maybe they're down and out. They don't have skills. Well, now they have an opportunity to gain skills, have a job that they love, learn a skill, right? So it's an ecosystem now that companies are building around these different, and that's just one example. But that's what really got me invigorated. And how do we solve these problems, through smart business innovations, right? And ideas around using the movement of money and using consumer habits, right? We all shop, right? We just need to do it a little better. And so that's what got me really excited in just diving into this stuff every day for the last, almost decade now. So it's really been an inspiring ride. And I try to tell all their stories. That's the idea.
Yes. And it is inspiring. That is for sure. Business is a powerful force. Why not use it for good? Right? It's a question.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question because I don't think we traditionally looked at it from that lens. We traditionally looked at business. How can it solve business problems, right? How can new businesses solve current business problems? Yeah. And that's fine, right? That has done well, right? We have innovated in many different spaces, and it's just looking at through the lens of how do we solve societal issues through that same lens that brought us, the iPhone, right? Or brought us, television and satellite pictures we could see in space, right? Like all these different innovations, but we still have veterans living in poverty, right? We still have, our education system is very rough in inner cities. We still have problems. When I was a kid growing up, is still there, right? Neighborhoods look exactly the same. So how is that possible that we can, water in certain towns is not sanitary, right? We're just talking America. We're not even talking developing countries, right? So we still have a ways to go, but business is really good at moving fast to solve problems instead of solving, how can we use our accounting software better and faster, right? To help us with the ROI on our business. How can we use that same mentality, perhaps even that same technology to, have our, healthcare system work better, or have a homeless database where we can, efficiently place people in different jobs or skill sets, or use it, for education purposes or healthcare records, right? There's all these different dynamics where we need to implement these innovations into that space.
So we're going to take our midpoint break here, and in just a moment we will be back with Grant Trahant. And I'd really like to ask this question next. Coming up, we'll find out why Grant is in Amsterdam. This is Hard Stock. We'll be right back in a moment. This is Hard Stock Radio. Thanks so much for listening. Today we're speaking with Grant Trahant, and he's the founder of Causeartist, does several podcasts, and has an impact investing website also. And Grant, how does a How does a fellow from New Orleans find himself in Amsterdam?
Well, there's a quick story and a longer story, and I'll try to make it medium-sized story. But born and raised in New Orleans and bounced around a lot, California, Mississippi, Florida, a lot of places, and settled in Kansas City, and that's where I met my wife. And so we've been living in Kansas City for the last decade. And then my wife got a call and an opportunity to move out here for her job. And I can work Causeartist. I can work on Causeartist from anywhere, right? So a little bit of marriage advice is probably don't move halfway across the world during a global pandemic. So we moved in January of 2020. So New Year's Day, we were in the sky in 2020 and moved to Amsterdam. So it's been really, really crazy to see the world from a different point of view, especially during these wild times. But yeah, it's been so yeah, her job took us here, and I've got to meet really, really some innovative people here in the Netherlands and across Europe. There's a lot going on around impact investing and also sustainable technology and sustainable fashion, and there's a lot of interesting things looking at it from their lens, right? A different culture, different languages, they have different issues and different problems, right? So looking to see how they solve things has been really interesting. It's something that I'm blessed to have the opportunity to do, so.
And there's several questions that I have kind of around this, but wow, what a great opportunity. It sounds so exciting. And, I've asked this question of other folks before. Does it seem that Europe is ahead of the United States in this whole sustainability journey? That's one question. And then, how do we scale this? You mentioned this before, tackling these issues in the United States or Europe is one thing, but then how do we scale it to places like India, where maybe the majority of the people don't even have electricity at this point?
Yeah, I think the first one is that being here, they really invest in mobility, like really, really well, like their government tools, so to speak. So transportation, government websites, government applications, government buildings. You really see the difference of where their money is invested in, right? Because all those facilities are beautiful. Like public transportation here is insanely incredible. The apps that they use and the websites like really work well. That's just allocating money into certain things and having it work, right? That's not like an innovative thinking thing. They're just doing what they should do, right? They're kind of just doing their jobs. And then in other systems, like healthcare here is just different, right? It's not better, so to say, it's just different how they do things. And so I would say they're better at investing in things and using their tax dollars like more efficiently. Whereas in America, like we all hate going to like the DMV or trying to pay something online or a government website, or public transportation is not what it should be. Like there's just little things that you see differently just from that lens, and that's, to me, that's everything, right? When you invest your citizens' dollars well and allocate it correctly, like that's a really big deal. So I definitely tip my hat to them for that. As far as like sustainability, I would say in some areas for sure around sort of like energy, and really sort of issues where the government plays a role. Like I think they're definitely more ahead of the game, and they're starting to allocate capital more for climate technology and different things around climate specifically. But the US, I think, is probably further along in products, right? So, accessories and fashion, right? Sustainable, ethical fashion. I think actually the US is probably ahead, just because I think they have more startup founders doing many more things. So that part, I think the US is ahead from a product standpoint. But I think Europe is ahead in government looking at how they can use their revenue that they get from taxpayers to make an impact on society. I think it's just a different thought process where they say, hey, the market will do it. Businesses will do it. If consumers want it, businesses will do it, which is true, right? But it doesn't mean that the government can't play an efficient role as well and a good partner in, stewarding, certain things around innovation and, mobility. So I think both are different. And some, I think US does some things better. The market, they let the entrepreneurs and startups kind of do their thing, which is really good because there's a lot of creativity in that. And then I think here the spearheading is really, the government. They actually launched a fund where I think it's $100 million fund where they're investing in startups. They're actually using taxpayer dollars to invest in companies. So then the taxpayers would, if those companies are successful, the taxpayers would reap the benefits from that, right? So that type of stuff I really like, and it's a really interesting and innovative way to look at it. And so I think taking those type of innovative risk, I think is really interesting. We'll see how it goes, but again, I think it's a good step.
And how do we scale this? I mean, that's
and that's really what I like to focus on more than anything, because we can scale. Like usually the countries and the people who get all the nice shiny thing stuff are the ones who can afford it, right? So how do we make ethical and sustainable fashion like affordable, right? How do we make climate change or investing in climate change work for, people in New York City and people in, New Delhi or Uganda, right? So as certain areas of the world, like you said, don't have, clean water or clean electricity that really works well. Like India, you mentioned before, land rights is sort of a big issue in India, right? So how do we use technology, specifically like blockchain, to put land rights on an open ledger where people know what they own and it cannot be taken from them, whether it's from a company, whether it's from, even a family member, right? Or it's from like the government. Like there's things happening around small things that we don't think of, right? Banking is a huge thing in the developing world, right? How do we get banking services to people living in, rural parts of the world? And so like, in a lot of ways, the developing world is really moving quite fast with mobile payments and mobile money and the unbanked being, banked, so to speak, where that's actually moving much more efficiently because they can start from nothing, right? They're not starting from like institutional banks in America, right, where innovation is really slow because they don't necessarily need to do it, right, or want to do it because they kind of have not monopoly, but like there's just not a lot of players in the game. When you go to a place that doesn't have like any banks, you can start from scratch and try to build something through mobile apps, through mobile money. So that's really, really interesting. And I think there's a little bit of an advantage there that they can kind of start at scratch with the best technology humanity has ever had. Right. So it's a really interesting place to be in. Now, if you still got to implement it all right? So there's ways it could go wrong for sure. But I think starting at a point to where you have the tools now, right? And you have the ability to go on a Zoom call, with somebody in Uganda and somebody from, Los Angeles to talk about, certain things, right? Or certain developments that they see and get advice and just give different thoughts from different parts of the world. Somebody in Sweden can talk to, somebody in Mexico or something, right? And they can talk about certain things. Mm-hmm. That is a crazy thing. Yeah. And so now we have the ability of mobile money and the transfer of payments to be global, very fast, very quick, very efficient. We have the ability of a founder to do their website from a firm in, Morocco or something, right? If they want to do that, so that's a really, really amazing time to be alive and to be able to like think of different ways to be creative and do things. And going back to the product thing, I talked to so many founders where the ability for a U.S. consumer to walk into a grocery store, right, and buy, coffee from, a fair trade supplier in Colombia, or buy skincare and beauty products, from a place in Kenya, from a woman's co-op in Kenya, right? Those things are powerful. Those things change lives. Those things change generational lives for communities where the U.S. consumer or European consumer or Mexican consumer or an Asian consumer, right, can buy something from, a fair trade co-op, right, or whatever it may be that they think is ethical and sustainable, and they want to support that. They're going to buy those products anyway. But now we have the ability to search and find and discover things that we never had the chance to discover before. So we have a chance to, us as consumers, to spend money more responsibly, I believe, and more effectively for the economy. It's really, really powerful. And so that's kind of what the stories that I've been fortunate to tell and talk to founders and distribute content like that around the world. It's hard to kind of say like the power that has when you can buy something from a store and it affects somebody halfway across the world. Now that kid gets the surgery on their eye, right? That kid gets to go to primary school, right? This is small things, right? But it's powerful things that, a generation of people have not had, because, the only way that they can survive is drop out of school and work, right? And now it's different when their mom can, make shea butter or something like that, be part of a co-op, get paid for it. Now her son or daughter can go to school because she has a consistent job, because a U.S. consumer buys shea butter, loves it, but want to buy it from a fair trade company, right? An organic company. So like, that's really good. That's like a really powerful way to look at, globalization as a good and powerful thing. And then the opposite side of that is sort of the exploitation of labor, right? From developing countries, right? Where you don't have, those fair trade labels. You have fast fashion, right? That destroys the environment and also exploits their workers, right? And we've seen the detriment of globalization when you talk about exploitation versus looking at globalization through the lens of, like a fair trade company, or, somebody that's certified organic. Those are things we need to learn as consumers of how our purchasing power affects the world. And I know that's like really weird to think about, but that's actually so what it does.
Yeah. So how might folks find you, Grant? This is very exciting stuff. So
I try to keep it as easy as possible. It's just at Causeartist pretty much everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then me personally, it's just at my name. So at Grant Trahant, pretty much anywhere. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to find me and reach out. I try to make it as easy as possible.
Well, we shall be following your endeavors with great excitement and anticipation. This has been great, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
This is Heartstock, and as usual, we shall see you next week. In the meantime, peace.
Heartstock Radio is a production of KBMF 102.5 Butte America Radio. Hear our programs every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time via livestream at butteamericaradio.org.